Hello, I am Bella Brigham, as you all know, and today let's talk about languages. Today I will be specifically speaking about three sources of languages. I have done extensive research into this topic and even took a linguistics course in high school, making me highly qualified to speak on this topic. There are roughly 7,117 languages that are spoken in the world today, and each one is different than the other. This number doesn't take into account the 573 dead or extinct languages that are not spoken or studied anymore. Most of these were local dialects of the same language, but they had no records to go with them and keep them alive. Languages are what make us and the human race unique from other species. No other natural system of communication is like human language because we are able to express our thoughts on a wide range of topics like the weather, the past, the future, science, anything. There's no way of us knowing how language truly originated, but we are able to see how it has changed over the 5,000 years or so of written records of the languages of the world. There is evidence to suggest that languages developed between 50,000 and 100,000 years ago, well before written language, but the inner workings of how are still to be discovered. There are many different speculations on how language originated, one being the divine source. Per the name, this speculation is that language originated from religion, whether it was Christianity, Hinduism, or another religion entirely. Experiments have been conducted over the centuries to learn what the original God-given language was by leaving infants in complete isolation and to see what language they picked up over a couple years span. But every experiment has had a different outcome with no conclusive results. Some notable experiments were that of the Egyptian pharaoh Psammetichus, who 2,500 years ago tried this experiment on two newborns, and after 2 years of isolation with goats and a mute shepherd, the children uttered the word Begos. This is a word that was recognized in the language of Phrygian, a much older language than any Egyptian one, meaning the word bread. Many believe, however, that the children were imitating the sounds of the goats that they lived amongst, which in reality makes more sense. Around 1500 AD, King James IV of Scotland conducted a similar experiment, and these children were reported speaking Hebrew. This confirmed the king's belief that Hebrew was the original language of Christianity and of the Garden of Eden. But with further evidence of children that were found in isolation that were there by accident, like Victor, a boy in France in the late 1700s, and Jeannie, the American child found in isolation in the 1970s. Neither spoke a single word. And even trying to find answers in biblical texts won't help, as it is recorded in the Bible, in Genesis 11:9, that God divided the single language of the earth into multiple. And another source is the social interaction source. This source indicates that early human interaction is what developed the first languages, and from there expanded into the thousands we have today. It is the idea of noises involved in the physically straining activities that prompted the development of human language, mainly involving grunts and yells, the same sounds that are used for the depiction of cavemen in cartoons and movies. This source doesn't sum up the answer of the origin of the sounds in languages, as apes and monkeys use grunts as a way of communicating, but they haven't developed speech. And finally, the genetic source. Nearly every human being on Earth develops in the same way. At birth, our brains are the quarter of their eventual weight, and the larynx, which is our voice box, is much higher in the throat to allow for babies to drink and breathe at the same time. In a short time after birth, however, the larynx moves downward, the brain develops, and the child starts walking and talking. This almost automatic set of human developments have led some to believe that something much bigger is the source of language. Children born deaf and those that don't develop speech are able to become fluent in sign language at a very young age. This led scholars to believe that the language capacity is genetically hardwired into newborns and is what allows for a usually quick grasp of speech and language. The innateness hypothesis expands on the genetic source theory and dives into the idea of human genetics coming into play. There have been gene mutations for other parts of the body, so why not a gene that is mutated to advance human language? This hypothesis almost relates human genetics to how computers work with being pre-programmed. What if humans were pre-programmed with a language gene that is yet to be discovered? For me, I believe that there is a hidden gene somewhere in our DNA that gives us the wonderful trait of speech, and that our geographical location then determines the language and dialects spoken around the world. This seems to be the most viable source as we are the only living creatures able to communicate in the way we do. But what's to say that other species eventually will be able to speak as we do? But that is a much more complicated path to go down.